The sergeant of arms is taking it over.
Oh, you're in a state house yesterday?
Hey, right now.
Oh, did you do any damage there or anything? Or
So
no?
what room are you in, Andy?
This is Senate Natural Resources across the hall.
Oh,
Oh, you're
Hmm.
there now. Oh,
Yeah,
Okay.
we had the whole table taken over with stuff.
wow. All right. You're going to do damage today. Oh, boy. Okay. Well, we're live this morning, and it's Thursday, and the Senate Transportation Committee is beginning our. We don't have much on the agenda today, but we're trying to fill in with. We had a couple changes, and Liz is trying to do some fill in. But our first item is S40. I don't think we're unfamiliar with that subject. And is there anyone here to join us to offer any other comments? Anthea, are you with us this morning?
Here. I don't really have anything to add aside from
Okay.
the walkthrough, but if you want me to do a brief walkthrough again, I can do that or answer any questions.
Now, why don't we do that just to make sure we've got everything in order if we're going to pass this out. So just to be sure, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep. Liz, can you give me share screen access? And while she's doing that, I'll just, do the big picture again. This is the blue light bill. Thank you, Liz. So this would be allowing one blue light to be permitted on the rear of certain emergency services vehicles. And it needs to only be visible primarily from the rear of the vehicle and only operated when the vehicle is parked.
Now, that is for ambulance also, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so ambulance or fire truck.
Yeah, so going down to what the existing law says, so currently for purposes of the sirens and the red or red and white signal lamps, those can be on ambulances, any other, and with this change from fire apparatus, ambulances, any other emergency medical service vehicles, vehicles owned or leased by a fire department, vehicles used solely in rescue operations, or vehicles owned or leased by or provided to volunteer firefighters and volunteer rescue squad members, including a vehicle owned by a volunteer's employer when the volunteer has the written authorization from the employer. So that's for the red and white lights. This blue light would only be available on a subsection of those vehicles. It would only be authorized EMS vehicles or vehicles owned or leased by a fire department. So the volunteer vehicles would not be able to have the blue light primarily visible from the rear of the vehicle.
And it's only when the vehicle is parked and not moving.
Correct. So you see that language on page 2, lines 11 and 12. The commissioner shall require the lamp be mounted so as to be visible primarily from the rear of the vehicle and only used when the vehicle is parked.
Okay. And it does prohibit volunteers or rescue. We want to make sure of that because we just want it on the fire truck. And if there's, okay, yeah.
So they wouldn't be eligible for the permit.
Right. Okay.
Can I ask you a question, Chair Mazza?
Go right ahead, Senator Chittenden.
So this is my first rodeo. I'm a new guy around here. And so to the point that Chair Mazza just raised, do we need in this bill what the penalties are if, say, somebody goes a little too far with this and puts a blue light on their red private truck? Or is that something separate?
So I can look into whether or not this is viewed as a traffic violation. If it's viewed as a traffic violation, to have a unpermitted signal lamp on your vehicle, and maybe that's something that the department can speak to. I would be looking to the Judicial Bureau's waiver penalty chart for that and to see if there was a code on the DMV's website. If it is a traffic violation, then because there is no civil penalty specified in statute, it would default to the maximum civil penalty of $1,000, and the Vermont Judicial Bureau would set a waiver penalty somewhere between them.
Is there a definition now between a fire truck or I know a lot of fire departments, I know ours, we have some pickup trucks, smaller vehicles. is that classified as a fire truck also, or it has to be a big? Where do you draw the line on? Because the smaller trucks, could they have one also?
So if it was a vehicle that was owned or leased by a fire department, I think that would be sort of the simplest way that it would fall under this. Once we get into the different vehicles that a fire department operates, I'm so out of my depth. But in both, for the red and white, it's saying vehicles owned or leased by a fire department. And then same for the blue light, EMS vehicles or vehicles owned or leased by a fire department.
Okay. Questions? Go ahead. Anything else, or is that?
That's it. It's a short bill. It would be effective on July 1 of 2022. And now that I've taken my share screen down, I will look up to see if there is a civil penalty for.
Tony Packos is on with us this morning. Oh, Senator Perschlick, I'm sorry.
Anthea, did you just say July of 22? Why would it be a whole year?
Oh, sorry, 2021. We are in 2021. I was just working on a bill that has to do with 2022. Yes, July 1 of 2021. Thank you, Senator.
Tony, good morning.
Good morning, Chairman.
Yeah.
So for the record, I'm
add to help us here get through this, or
sure. For the record, Director Tony Fakis, Vermont Department of Motor Vehicles Enforcement and Safety Division. So thank you and good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee. So we are supportive of this bill. With there's some concerns that you've already spoke to. One of the important pieces that is included, that these are agency owned or leased vehicles, not private vehicles. So we would not be issuing individual permits for that. I just like to there's some draw your attention to there's I don't know if you've seen the House version H56.
No, we haven't. We should have reviewed that, but we did not.
Okay. Just in a conversation that I had with the commissioner and Colonel Birmingham yesterday, there's one piece that our department finds favorable in that language in H56, and that would also conversely allow for a police agency to have one red lens in their light bar or their rear-facing package.
That's right.
And where I'm going with that, I don't know if you've seen that there's a 2008 was the last document that was circulating around with the efficacy of how far light penetrates under different conditions, time of day, and so forth. And I think that's a really important part of this conversation. So using that, that analogy, it could be beneficial to again look at or maybe mirror some of that from H56.
Yeah, I thought we had discussed that earlier, but that's right. That's a good point. We had discussed that because the colonel did express his desire to have it on police, have the red, because certain times of day it's different. So, but this is not in here, Anthea?
It's not. I do have a side-by-side of comparing S40 and H56, if you would like me to put that up on the screen so you can see the small differences between the two.
Thank you. That'd be great. Yeah. Yeah, because I forgot that they requested it, we okayed it. So, okay.
And if I can just add, just for consideration, I'm not advocating one way or the other, but where it states, the vehicle must be, not in motion. Well, like, there's the fire truck that's got the one blue light. Most lighting, a lot of the apparatus, when the emergency lighting is on, some cruisers, there's a lot of the technology now, you can do a lot of pretty neat things in terms of even the directional patterning of light flashes, especially for if you're on the highway, for example, and you want everybody to kind of merge left or to merge right. But having just when it's stationary, turn that light on, I just don't know if that's going to be a little technical challenge for the actual upfitting of ambulances and fire trucks or police cars in that regard. Just something to consider. I just want to put it out there just from my experience with how a lot of emergency lighting and those switches are on. And from what I've seen in other states that do utilize a dual lens platform to the rear. And the other, just another point of consideration, even though it says one lens, but you can even, if need be modify that to even something along the line that no more than like 20 or 25% of rear facing lighting would be of the opposite color of the primary. In other words, if it's a fire truck, no more than, let's say, 20% or whatever, just so you don't end up with, one lens covers half of a light bar. Just something to consider in our approach. But other than that, DMV is supportive of moving forward with this type of legislation for, again, the safety of EMT personnel, firefighters, and police officers.
Well, that's good. Because I know this is going to be tweaked in years to come. And that's why the best we can do now, because it is brand new, and I would like to make it as safe as possible. Yeah, because I know it'll be revisited every couple of years. They're going to want something else added to it.
Well, I know I was used to it coming up year after year after year, as so many of you. So
yeah, that's right. So we have to address the language for the police in this bill somehow, right?
Can add it.
Yeah.
Do you want to see what's in H56?
Sure. Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. So hopefully you can see a 2-column chart up on your screen. On the left is S40, on the right is H56. The first piece is what Tony was just speaking to. It is expanding, and this is in subdivision 1B, that big blocks of highlighting. This is dealing with law enforcement agency vehicles. So it's just doing some cleanup language saying sirens, blue signal lamps, or blue and white signal lamps, or a combination thereof, may be authorized for all law enforcement vehicles owned or leased by a law enforcement agency, a certified law enforcement officer, or the Vermont Criminal Justice Council. So that's the current law, the blue and white lights on the top of the vehicle. New law would be in subdivision B, a red signal lamp or an amber signal lamp or a combination thereof may be authorized for all law enforcement vehicles owned or leased by a law enforcement agency. And then it mimics that same language, and it shall require the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles in issuing the permit to require that the lamp or lamps be mounted so as to be visible primarily from the rear of the vehicle. And there's nothing in there about only when the vehicle is parked. So this would same deal, primarily visible from the rear of the vehicle, but there is not the inclusion of the parked piece. To what Tony was talking about, instead of having it say a red signal lamp or an amber signal lamp, that's where you could include your percentage threshold if you wanted to go in that direction, as opposed to singular lamps. No other changes for purposes of law enforcement vehicles. Moving down to the language for your emergency services vehicles, it is similar, except it's a blue signal lamp or an amber signal lamp or a combination thereof may be authorized for all EMS vehicles, pluralizing the lamps, and then eliminating the part about only used when the vehicle is parked. So same language would apply for both the law enforcement vehicles and the emergency vehicles, primarily visible from the rear of the vehicles for those additional signal lamps, but no requirement that they only be used while parked. And then the only other difference is that currently there is a prohibition in statute on amber signal lamps being used on a vehicle that has a permit issued for the installation of a siren. And since you would be authorizing law enforcement and emergency services vehicles to have the amber signal lamp, changing subsection B to reflect the fact that amber signal lamps are allowed on the vehicles with sirens, but that road maintenance vehicles and service vehicles and wreckers may not be issued a permit for the installation and use of a siren. Not a change from current law, but clarifying that this amber light is allowed on these other vehicles in accordance with the changes that are being made above.
Seeing we're both working on the same bill, do we want to wait till the House bill comes over and add it to that, or what do you want to do?
They haven't taken this bill up yet. I don't
Okay.
know if it's something they would put in the miscellaneous motor vehicle bill or not. I prepared this side by side, less because they were taking it up and more in anticipation of being asked questions about how S40 and H56 differed.
Okay.
You know, I think in this COVID environment, Mr. Chairman, the more we can have it incorporate. And if we agree with these changes and they make sense, then it why not move forward? And
All right.
if we agree with them and take action on S40, and if it incorporates all these policies that, because we're really struggling. Obviously, this is not a new issue, has been brought up. I think Tony Faco said he remembers testimony for a long time. And the reason that the committee had not agreed with the proposal was because law enforcement was quite affirmative in in opposing the change. And so we deferred to the position taken in the testimony from the public safety perspective and the state police. And now obviously the research has changed the discussion, and people have reviewed it and changed their position. So my view is, in light of that, in light of the research, and now's an opportunity. And I think if we've got the time, the more we can have a bill that incorporates the current thinking and recommendations, we should do it and move it forward. And hopefully the House will not find a need to make any changes, and that will be the end of this discussion, which has been how many years in the making, Senator Mazza?
Since I was a kid. Okay,
Yeah.
Senator Pertlet.
Yeah, I think we should add in just that one paragraph about the police being allowed to use the red lights. I think we heard from the state trooper testimony that they liked the fact that the vehicle had to be stopped. I understand on some vehicles, maybe the newer ones that are coming, prepared for other states, that they can do the blue lights running. I know my fire department felt it was okay to do the only when parked, but maybe that's just the age of their vehicle. But as the chair said, this is likely going to, be tweaked over the years. And if we want to go with, everybody supported what we had. The only kind of recommendation we heard was about this red light. There was a disagreement on the parked part. I'm okay with keeping the parked part, but adding the red lights for the police cruisers.
Which is what we've heard the testimony on.
Senator Mazza.
Yes, Senator Ingles.
I'm opposed to this bill for a lot of reasons, mainly because of who I've talked to in my area. And that's really where it gets down to. And one of the reasons why I am is because we're saying that law enforcement, and I appreciate Director Tony Faco's testimony, but even the state police are concerned that it's going to be misconstrued that there's law enforcement on the ground when in fact that there isn't. I mean, I think that's what the state police had testified earlier. I was trying to find it in my notes. In talking with 7 different departments, one of the most compelling parts of it is the fire chief, plus he's with EMS. And he says, it's pretty nice on the scene sometimes. I can get a lot done. I can get, if I have a person that's injured and a little bit combative, he says, I can diffuse the situation. He says, but it's a remarkable difference when the blue lights show up. And he says, I have to go back and redo everything that I've accomplished. I've got another chief, one of the larger departments around. I mean, we're all volunteers up here. They're not there. And as I imagine, most of the areas are, except for the big communities. But this chief says, I just don't have time to go around and patrol whether my guys have blue lights in their vehicles. He says, I know that I'm going to have to police that. I don't want to be doing that. Another smaller department says, it's not going to make a difference for us. We pull onto the scene, we angle the vehicle in such a way that the blue light probably isn't going to be seen anyways, to protect ourselves from ongoing traffic. I just don't see where this one single light is going to make that much of a difference. And I'm listening to my legislators who have been there for a long time. If it's not an overwhelming factor in making new law, then don't do it. And that's where I'm opposed to it. So I'm not in favor of moving this forward, only because of what I'm hearing from my constituents. And I have to listen to that.
Chairman Mazza.
Yes, Senator Chittenden.
So, Senator Ingles, I'd love to hear from some of the people that you've been hearing from with concerns, because the testimony that's come forward so far has persuaded me to be supportive of this. But I would love to explore just a couple of things I heard you just say. For example, is it mandated that the blue light? It's not. They don't. The local fire districts don't have to put either the blue light on the apparatus or actually illuminate it, right? So as long as it's optional, I was a volunteer firefighter, and Chief Morton was my fire chief, so he came and testified. And also a couple of friends have reached out, and what they're interested in Williston, they served what they called the idiot strip. Maybe I shouldn't call it that, but that's Interstate 89. So we jokingly called it Interstate 89 the idiot strip. And when you're on the interstate and there's cars streaming by, I hear these firefighters want to be able to put the blue light on just to be able to elevate raise the awareness of those cars going 80, 90 miles an hour so that they slow down. So that's why I'm inclined to support it, because of the testimony from Colonel Birmingham, as well as from the fire chiefs, and just giving them the option for when they're positioned in those high stakes, high speed areas like the idiot strip. Can I say idiot strip, or is that, I'm sorry if I broke a rule to use that word in committee, Senator Chair Mazza. But Senator Ingles, thank you for that comment. I'd love to hear from the people that are objecting to this. I like this because I heard from Ken Morton and from Matt Birmingham that in support of this, but I'd love to hear the other side of it more so to better make sure we're not making a mistake.
I'd be more in favor of going to a different aspect of it. And just like they double the fines in work zones, have, I know you can't always do it. You can't set up that fast sometimes, but if somebody's caught violating that speed ordinance, do it through public education by ticketing people coming into a dangerous situation. I just don't seem to get the overwhelming support in my area that this is going to make that much of a difference. So what harm does it do? Well, it doesn't do any harm. But again, before I vote to change and make a law, I really want an overwhelming feeling in my community that they support it that much. And I keep on hearing from three of them. I'm looking, they made the same comment. Don't fall on your sword on this. If it passes, it passes, but don't fall on your sword on it. So it's not that I think it's a terrible idea. The part that bothers me the most is that the police have said, we do not want this to be construed as there's law enforcement on the scene, and this blue light is going. And that is the whole intention of this, is to make people think that there's law enforcement on the scene. And we've heard testimony after testimony that they do not want this to represent that there's law enforcement on the scene when there's in fact not.
Okay. All right, Senator Perchlik, you got a question? Yep.
Well, thank you, Senator Ingles, for reaching out to folks. But there is the evidence that it's not just that maybe somebody thinks there's a police officer on the scene, but that the blue lights just are easier to see. That's my understanding is why the sheriffs and the state troopers are supporting it when they didn't before, is because just the evidence is it's easier to see. So that's the main reason. There might be this ancillary reason that people see blue light and just think police and so want to slow down. But it is just easier to see. And even though the Trooper Birmingham did say that they were worried about that, they still supported the bill, which I think is just important to note.
I'm surprised we didn't hear from the funeral homes, because they were after purple lights seriously for many, many years. It was a common thing that they should have purple lights on there. So I guess they have no lobbyists or something at this point. But I know for many, many years they were after the purple lights on ambulance of funeral homes. Oh yes, Senator Chittenden.
So maybe this is too much of consensus building, but is there a reason to explore limiting the use of the blue light on a fire apparatus to when the car is parked in an area with a speed limit in excess of a certain speed? Firefighters are all about rules and regulations, and if this is restricted to just fire apparatus, would that, Senator Ingles, address some of your concerns if we further limited the use of the blue light?
I don't know that it has to be that complicated. Either it's a light or it's a not. And I think that's where it gets down to it. I think pulling up on the scene, these first responders have enough to worry about, whether they have to worry, in my position or in my mind, that they'd have to worry about, well, do we or do we not? Either they use it or they don't. And I think that's where I would be on that.
Any other questions? Well, I think we got some language we want to change. We will wait. There's no immediate hurry. We get it out today. I'd rather get this thing correct the first time if we're going to do it, because it is a major bill. And let's let Anthea work on it, and we can take it up either tomorrow or the day we get back from. There'll still be time to cross over. We'll still have time. So in fact, I'm going to do a little research into my folks. I haven't contacted them. The last I heard, the fire department wanted it, which is fine. But I haven't checked with the police in the area. So, but anyway.
Senator
Yes,
Mazza,
yes.
it seems like obviously I guess we're getting differing positions. I would say that I've been approached by volunteer fire departments for a long time about the need to do this. I wonder if there isn't a position, or I don't know if there's an association, but it seems to me that this has been one of their legislative priorities. And I think that within any proposal, they're going to have a difference of opinion. But if there's some kind of document, and it seems like I know when the firemen have come to the State House, this has been one of their priorities that they have articulated for us. And so is there, and maybe Senator Perchlik has got his hands on it, but it seems to me that we have had in the past documents from the association that basically took a position in support of this legislation. And I think it might be helpful to see what that official consensus is, if there is such a document.
Just want to get it right the first time. Yes, Senator Perchlik.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that we have testimony. I'll see if I can find it from the Vermont Professional Firefighters Association that did support it. So I'll look for that.
Yeah, I'm sure we've had it, because I remember Gene Perkins, who is from Rygate, has been a proponent of this for a long time, and that's a volunteer, not a professional fire district. So I know that it sounds like Senator Ingalls has got feedback from people who are saying this isn't a priority for us. Other people have said this is a priority for us, and we've got people that say, and their argument, it's always been the safety concern.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we've got a couple little things to check out, and we will do that. Get back to it. Anyone else want to speak on this before we move on to our next item? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Yes, Senator Perchlik.
So I assume Anthea would have spoke up if she's unclear what the task is about. You're just adding that one paragraph?
Yep, I'm going to add the part about law enforcement vehicles being able to have the red signal lamp. I'm keeping the part about it only being used when it's parked. So that'll continue to be a difference between S40 and H56. The only thing that I was going to email you about, but I'll ask you now, is amber signal lamps. Do you want that to go with both, or just leave the amber signal lamps alone? I don't know if that's a question that you want to get the department's position on or not.
It's not in either bill now, or it's in
H56. So for that additional rear facing signal lamp in both instances. So for the additional one for law enforcement vehicles being able to have the red light, it's red or red and amber. And for the additional one on the emergency service vehicles on the rear of the vehicle, it's blue or blue and amber.
Does Mr. Fakos have an opinion on
that? I think we remain neutral, that keeping all those options available from the House version.
Yeah, it's okay to me to add the amber lights.
Okay, so we'll have the addition of the law enforcement piece We'll be adding amber to both the law enforcement piece and the emergency services piece. And we will continue to have a difference between H56 and S40 be the parked vehicle piece. If that's what the committee wants, I'm good on my directions.
Mhm.
Yes.
Senator Chittenden got his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can see. Okay, go right ahead. I don't see you on there, but go right ahead, Senator.
I didn't pause because I didn't want to. I support what you just said, Anthea. I just had another comment. Okay, so my comment is, I'm curious. Historically, has like the chief colonel of the Vermont State Police come forward and been ambivalent about bills? Because I heard him say he supports this, and so it's going to be hard for me to go against the colonel of the Vermont State Police, Birmingham, and fire chiefs. But is it their precedent for them to just come forward and say, we don't necessarily support it, but we're not against it? Or is it really support or against?
I think they've seen more science of the issue over the years, and I think they've got to the point where they can live with it as long as it stays where it's supposed to stay, which we know it'll change. But I think what they've read about blue visibility and red visibility, that's what I gather out of it, because I know they've been opposed the years. We've been on this bill for many, many, many years. And the fear has always been mixing them too badly. And then you're going to, everything's just going to blend together, and who knows what emergency, who knows what the police is. And so, my hope is when we do this bill, that the future doesn't open it up to things that we can't control, and we only can control while we're in session, our own bill. But I just hope it doesn't get to the point where it's expanded to blue lights all over the place or red
But
lights.
if it does, it would take, to make it legal, it would take an act of legislature to do
that's
that,
right. No,
right? I mean, that's not that there won't be a push necessarily.
Don't worry, this is not going to stop here, and we all know that it's not going to stop here. One light's not going to stop, and that's fine. I just want to give you a heads up that this is going to broaden over the years to come, and that's fine. That next legislature can do what they wish. That's the way it works.
I just hate to see the blue light get lessened by getting diluted. I hear the studies and what people say and all of that, but red is for emergencies, yellow is for caution, blue is because law enforcement's present. And I hate to see that get diluted.
Okay, everybody knows what their mission is, I guess, and we will move on, I think. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Nobody else was on the agenda today for this bill, was there? I don't think anybody else is in the waiting room, or nope. I think that's okay. Liz, what have you filled in next? Did you have something that we're prepared to do?
You're all set for Act 151 with Dan Riley and Kelly Lucci
Okay,
of Efficiency Vermont.
All right, we'll switch right over. Act 151, energy efficiency. Charge funds for greenhouse gas emissions, and Dan Riley and Kelly Lucia. Okay, Lucy. All right, who wants to be first?
Sure. Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Mazza, and thank you, the committee, for having us here. For the record, I'm Dan Riley, the Director of Public Affairs for Efficiency Vermont, and joining me is Kelly Lucci, our Director of Partner Engagement. What we wanted to do today is give the committee a brief update on our programs that were passed as a result of Act 151, which passed the legislature last year, which allows Efficiency Vermont to work in transportation for the first time. And so I have a brief slide deck that I'm going to share, and then we can get right into questions. I'm just going to share my screen. I'm going to just kind of give a quick overview of how we got here, and then turn it over to Kelly, who's going to do a quick overview of our transportation programs as part of this bill. So
Okay.
Just give me 1 second to share my screen here. Can everybody see?
Not yet. I can't. I just says starting sharing, but okay, there we go. Got it.
Sure. So very quickly, just quick background on Efficiency Vermont, since this is our first time before the committee in the new biennium. For over 20 years, we've developed a statewide infrastructure for delivering energy savings programs to Vermonters as the state's energy efficiency utility. We have staff in nearly every county across the state, and we have strong relationships up and down the supply chain and with customers who view us as a trusted partner. And that's, the approach we take is really to transform markets, making efficient products and services more affordable, making energy more affordable. And that's really the core idea of what we're starting to bring in with this pilot program to electric vehicles. Very quickly, we believe our results speak for themselves. We've helped the state of Vermont save over $2.6 billion in energy costs over our 20 years that we've been in existence. And those upgrades will reduce more than 12 million metric tons of carbon. And we're very proud of our robust energy efficiency workforce. We have a network of over 400 businesses we work with, in terms of training, workforce development, and market support. So why transportation? In terms of if we're the state's electric energy efficiency utility, why did we decide to get to make the push to get into transportation? And it really comes down to this slide. Every year we at Efficiency Vermont commission an energy burden report using town level data to look at how Vermonters are spending their money on energy costs. The average Vermont family spends 10% of their income on energy costs, averaging out to be about $5,800 each year. And you can really see from these three buckets, transportation costs are by far the highest energy costs for Vermonters, making up about 45% of the total energy burden, 35% for thermal, 20% for electric. Historically, we've been able to do a lot of great stuff looking at that electric bucket in terms of helping Vermonters save money on their electricity bills. We've been able to work in the thermal sector using some additional funds from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative and the Forward Capacity Market. But really, it was that 45% in the transportation sector that we were eager to do more. I would also add that looking at this breakdown, that very closely lines up with Vermont's total emissions profile, right? In terms of, it's pretty close in terms of 45% of our total GHG emissions come from transportation, 35% from thermal, and less so from our electric sector now. And so with that as the framework, last year, the legislature passed Act 151. And just a quick overview of that was a 3-year pilot program, which allowed the EEUs, in this case, Efficiency Vermont and Burlington Electric, to spend up to $2 million of their existing resource acquisition budget on programs and services that reduce GHG emissions in the thermal and transportation sector. That resource acquisition budget, those are the electric efficiency charge that we collect on monthly bills. To put that in perspective, our total EEC budget in 2019 was about $50 million. So we're looking at a ceiling of about 3 to 4% of our total budget. However, to ensure we're using that as wisely as possible and to avoid any issues of cross-subsidization, we do have to adhere to the following 5 criteria. The first and the most important one is it must have a nexus with electric usage, right? That meaning this has to be used for electric vehicle updates, since this is a charge we are collecting on electricity bills. It must be additive and complementary. These programs shall not replace or be in competition with any existing programs or any under Tier 3 or any other state programs. We obviously must coordinate with utilities and the relevant state agencies, and Kelly can talk about that in just a minute. One key one here is really, it must be delivered on a statewide basis, right? We can't concentrate all of our programs in one corridor or one geographic location. And that has really informed a lot of our program design as well. And then finally, the implementation of the plan that we devised and we just submitted on February 12th, it has to be approved by the Public Utility Commission. I would note that our plan, it is basically an up or down, yes or no approval by the PUC, dependent on us meeting these 5 criteria. So I know that that was a quick overview, but let me turn it over to Kelly so we can kind of get right into what exactly we're doing going forward.
Good morning.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sorry. Yes, go ahead, Senator.
Sure. Is the 2 million just for transportation? That was the total Act 51.
Yes, the legislation set a cap of we can use up to 2 million of our existing budget for either thermal or transportation programs. And again, focusing on that word existing, meaning we're not creating any new revenue streams here. It's using Efficiency Vermont's existing funds.
Okay, questions?
Why don't I throw it over to Kelly?
Okay, go right ahead.
Good morning. Thanks for making time for us to come in this morning. For the record, I'm
you.
Kelly Lucci, Director of Partner and Customer Engagement at Efficiency Vermont. So Dan gave an overview of how we got here. I wanted to just share with the committee some details on the plan that we've submitted to the Public Utility Commission and that they're currently looking over now, so we can answer any questions or take any feedback that you have on the components of this that are related to transportation. So quick overview of the proposed programs. As you can see, there is a major focus in transportation here. We expect in year one to have programs related to developing the supply chain for electric vehicles. And further slides, I'm going to talk in more detail about what that looks like. We also expect to be supporting an education and awareness campaign across the state in partnership with many other entities and organizations that are in this space. You'll note there is an intention for us to do small pilots in years 2 and 3, so 2022 and 2023, related to weatherization plus cold climate heat pumps. That's in the thermal space, so I'm not going to talk in any more detail about that today. We'll be just talking about the transportation programs. Dan, you can advance the slide.
Just a bit of a lag, but it should be fine.
No problem. So I wanted to talk first about the plan we have in place and we've submitted to the PUC related to developing the supply chain for electric vehicles. So I just tried to lay out all of the different sort of pieces of that that we're intending to move forward. So first and foremost, collaboration. As Dan alluded to, there is a requirement that we not duplicate, replicate any efforts that are currently in place in this space. So we actually did a 5-month process to solicit feedback on multiple drafts of this plan from relevant state agencies, from all of our partners in the utility sector, and from folks like the VEDA, the Vermont Automotive Dealers Association. And we expect to continue building on that feedback and collaboration going forward, just again, so we can make sure we're leveraging their work, we're building on the great work that's been done, and we're not duplicating any efforts. We really want to kind of rise the water under all the ships here. So we expect to be partnering deeply, collaborating as we build out and start implementing the plan. As you think about developing a supply chain for a technology like electric vehicles, a really key component of that is actually outreach. So I have a small team of folks who work on developing the supply chain for other technologies that are relatively new to the state. For example, cold climate heat pumps. We do the same thing with lighting and with other technologies as they're new. And what we expect to do here is really leverage some pretty similar tactics as we think about the supply chain for electric vehicles. So that's going to mean, getting out and talking to both new and used car dealerships. We understand that there are some real gaps potentially in terms of the sale of used electric vehicles in the state. We want to get out and talk to those business owners, understand what are the barriers that are in place right now that are potentially keeping them from connecting their customers with electric vehicles. And then we want to think about and implement a plan that can really help support them in breaking down those barriers. I wanted to also note in terms of outreach that we do have a special focus on geo-equity. As Dan noted, these programs are required to be offered on a statewide basis, but we particularly want to make sure we are addressing needs in areas of the state that might otherwise be underserved and where customers might not have as easy access to electric vehicles. So this will not be a focus in the northwest part of the state. We really want to make sure we're getting out and working with dealerships in the Northeast Kingdom, in the southern part of the state, in areas where potentially sales of electric vehicles have not really picked up. We want to understand why. Training. Once you get out and you understand the barriers, we expect that we'll be putting together a training plan. Again, this is very similar to what we've done with other technologies to try to drive larger adoption in the state. So we'll be really thinking about how we can connect salespeople with Vermont-specific information on incentives, on operating conditions for electric vehicles, really understanding what types of questions are they getting from customers and how can we arm them with information to make that purchase process as smooth and easy as possible, and frankly, as positive for Vermonters as possible when they're going in and have questions about electric vehicles. We also expect to collaborate with Burlington Electric Department and other utilities and VTrans as well in the development of a dealer network with support for charging stations, infrastructure. But really, we're thinking about building on what we've done within the supply chain for other technologies. We created what's called an efficiency excellence network for contractors, for distributors of technologies. And this really is a brand that is intended to give a signal to consumers that you are working with an organization or a business that has met certain standards, has made investments, has been trained to connect you with really good information about a new technology. And so we're thinking about how we can replicate what we've done with other technologies and create a network like that with car dealerships in the state.
And just to underscore the point that you're making, Kelly, in terms of why we're really honing in on the supply chain, obviously EV adoption and uptake in the state is a complex issue, right? And we really approached this from where could Efficiency Vermont have the most effective impact with these dollars, whether it was, charging station infrastructure or consumer awareness, or,
Right.
these two areas are really where we thought, given our statewide reach, our experience in terms of developing these other networks for these other technologies, and frankly, our brand as a trusted advisor, this is where we felt we could have the most impact.
And I'll note too, we spent 5 months developing this plan with stakeholders. These are the gaps that stakeholders who are in this space more than we are articulated to us. So when we were trying to develop a plan, we really wanted to frame it up to say, who are the folks who are involved in supporting electric vehicle technologies now? What can we learn from those organizations, and where do they see us having the most impact that can really support the work that they're already doing in this space?
Charging stations.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about it all this week, and if there's one thing you got to emphasize and promote is charging stations. Otherwise, people are not going to go to electric. But
Fast ones, 20-minute ones.
yeah, that's right. The fast charge. Until you tell the consumer that you can get charging and within 30 miles or 30, whatever it is, it's not going to happen. That's my opinion, but that's all right.
And we heard that too. I'll say what we learned is that there are a lot of investments being made in expanding that charging network. So rather than spending the dollars to actually put the charging network in place, we want to leave that to utilities and VTrans and ACCD and others who are already doing that work. But I think there's a real tie-in for us in terms of helping consumers understand where the charging stations are, how it works, and helping to address that range anxiety. Because I think you're right, that is certainly a barrier from a customer perspective when they're thinking about purchasing an electric vehicle.
I'd also just add, we had to be mindful of the constraint, the screening criteria that the legislature built into the bill. We have a total of $2 million per year, and it has to be, the geo-equity component. You would have to distribute those stations equally throughout the state. Because of those constraints, we thought it made the most sense to go in this area.
Yep.
Yes, Senator Berkeley.
Just anecdotal addition to that is I talked to somebody that recently bought a Chevy Bolt electric vehicle, and they were charging it at home, and they had never gone out and charged in a public station. And then when they needed to do that, they realized that they weren't sure how to do it. They didn't think ahead about getting like a charge point account.
Yep.
They just assumed when they pull up, it would be kind of like a gas station. There would be an easy way to pay. And there isn't. If you haven't like signed up ahead of time, it's not as easy. So I do think there's the value with Efficiency Vermont, getting out there to educate both the consumers, but also one thing that we talked about a couple of years ago that I haven't talked about this year in the committee is the kind of standards around charging station. Like we have a lot of rules around a gas pump, where that the price has to be labeled in gallons, and that we have the Agency of Agriculture's Department of Weights and Measures going measuring them to make sure you're actually getting a gallon. And we haven't developed those kind of regulations. So I think Efficiency Vermont with their network programs would be helpful on that area.
Those are
And
big things.
a universal charging head for that car. I'd be curious, Senator Percolate, if people even had the right plug-in, because there's like 4 different kinds and they're not interchangeable.
Right, especially on the fast chargers, it's a problem. Most of the level 2s are the same, but I've had that problem in my car. There's a charging station in Lebanon, or right over the border. I guess it's West Lev. It's a fast charger, but I can't use it because it doesn't. I have to use the level 2 if I'm there, because the level 3, the fast charger, is a different connection. So it's really annoying that we still haven't settled on one style. But I agree.
Yes, Senator Kitchell.
Well, the other part of this is because the technology is evolving so quickly, and just in the time in terms of how many miles you can go between charge, it's really that has changed dramatically. But the other question I have here is one of leasing versus purchasing, and I know that may be another issue, because some people are just saying, I'd rather lease because I don't want to buy. Normally some of us have had our gas powered cars for being Vermonters 10 years before trade. And so the subsidy or the benefit is for either, I just want to confirm my memory, is for either purchase, for purchase or lease.
Sorry, that I'm not following in terms of the state subsidy.
Yeah.
Kelly, I'll defer to you on here, but I may need to check on that and get back to you.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it can be applied in different ways depending on the preference of the consumer, but I believe there's some potentially some back end differences in terms of how that gets processed. I haven't been super close to that because we specifically tried to build this plan sort of on the assumption those programs existed, and then pulling together the information for customers once we actually launch.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking, if we're looking at sort of what are customer concerns, one is the rapidly changing technology and the extent to which you want to purchase, which then is a kind of a longer term commitment than opposed to a lease, which could allow you to, at the end of the lease, move up to get advantage of the more recent technology. So I was just wondering what your thoughts were about that. But I guess that's more of a collateral issue than one that is
right.
But yeah, I would just say that the larger point is a very good one, and especially around the changing of technology. And sort of the previous slide was about creating this network of dealers to help make sure that the dealers are trained on the technology and the incentives. But let me throw it to Kelly to kind of talk about the consumer awareness side, which really does get to that piece that you just raised, Senator.
Right. And Dan, so we don't have to go back to the prior slide. I do just want to note, because I think it's really important to note, we are not offering incentives direct to consumer through this program, because that would be duplicating other efforts, tier 3 programs. But we may offer incentives to car dealerships to participate in the network, to encourage them to offer a positive sales experience to customers. That's something that we typically think about doing when we're developing a supply chain at early stage. So I just wanted to call out, if you're looking at this later, you may see incentives that's not direct to customer incentives. It would be thinking about how we could leverage those to build the network of dealerships and create ultimately a positive experience for customers, which really does speak to the question you raised, Senator Kitchell, around making sure customers have an informed opportunity to sort of weigh the benefits of a lease versus a purchase. And then even, again, thinking about the market for used electric vehicles, which comes up quite a bit, like thinking about the different options that customers might have and where they might want to go. I expect that there will be a lot of kind of collateral and work around educational materials and work to ensure that people are connected with the information that they need to really make an informed choice. And that might mean that, if somebody calls Efficiency Vermont and they want to ask us about an electric vehicle, we can actually share information with them and talk about different options before they even walk in the door of a car dealership, in much the same way that we do with other technologies that people might be considering purchasing.
Well, I do know we've had testimony from car dealers, and they're a pretty competitive lot, and they're willing to sell. And so the extent to which we can influence consumer demand, but address the concerns or accommodate what is rapidly changing technology, I think is important to the there have been many people who, just because of their own philosophical desire to kind of get ahead out there in front, are willing to kind of be the first to procure. But for other people, I think that the protection of the investment and how that would work is a consideration.
Yep, absolutely. And so segueing into this, it actually is a perfect connecting point, because you talked about the need to drive up demand among customers in order for, car dealerships as a business to want to make investments and support those purchases. And so that's what this half of the proposal is intended to do. So really what we're talking about is a statewide campaign developed in collaboration with partners and grounded in research. So understanding what are the concerns and barriers, that are preventing Vermonters, and especially low and moderate income Vermonters, from being interested in purchasing electric vehicles at this point. How can we create messaging? How can we put information together that's going to help address those concerns and barriers? And then really embed that in a broader campaign that helps drive awareness of electric vehicles and help people feel like they're educated and informed when they're considering making what is really a very large purchase and investment on their part. We want them to feel really comfortable doing that. So we expect to develop that campaign, as I said, in collaboration with partners under the banner of Drive Electric Vermont, which I'm sure you all have some familiarity with. We envision this being somewhat similar to the statewide button-up campaign that is, that is run every fall related to weatherization. That is a brand that's sort of an umbrella for a number of partners who are engaged in weatherization, who want to support Vermonters in weatherizing. And in much the same way, we want to create sort of the umbrella brand and awareness that a number of other partners can then support through the production of their own content and their own messaging out to customers. So we expect to leverage advertising as a tactic for that. We want to leverage a variety of media outlets and place an extra focus on rural areas of the state, especially those where uptake of electric vehicles has been relatively low. So once we understand the barriers, we want to make sure we're being creative to connect with those customers in ways that will resonate with them and will meet their needs. Additionally, we think about engagement as a key tactic of a campaign like this. So, pre-pandemic, Drive Electric Vermont and partners would often hold, kind of electric vehicle tryout days, right? You could go and you could, they'd invite electric vehicle owners to share their vehicles, talk to people about what it's like to drive an electric vehicle and what charging is like, how the process of driving an electric vehicle works. I expect we'll be thinking about some really direct customer-focused engagement techniques like that. And our hope is that certainly, within the next few months, it'll be safer to get out and encourage people to come out and have those in-person interactions, which can make such a difference when people want to understand something new. They want to get their hands on it and really get a chance to see what it's like. I expect we'll also be investing in web resources that will really help people to understand electric vehicle technology and consider their options as they're thinking about shopping for an electric vehicle. Where can they go? What are dealerships, who are part of the participating network? What can they expect when they walk in the door? What types of questions should they ask? And then really thinking about, all of the different incentives that are available and helping them to understand what they're likely going to be able to access to reduce that upfront cost and make electric vehicle technology more accessible to them. And then finally, collateral, which we've talked about a couple times already, but I expect we'll be looking at the materials that are available in dealerships right now, thinking about, are there gaps we can fill? Are there unique pieces of information likely specific to all of the different incentive offerings that are available to customers in Vermont, to get those in dealerships and in the hands of people so they can, again, feel like they've got more information at the tip of their fingers as they're considering a large purchase like this, and what is going to feel like a big switch going from a gas vehicle to electric. Any questions, or do you want to advance the slide?
Okay, go right ahead. Go
Okay,
ahead.
great. So current status, what happens next? As Dan said, we submitted our plans, our detailed plans to the Public Utility Commission to consider, review, and decide based on the criteria Dan shared at the beginning of this presentation. That proposal went in on February 12th, and it's currently before the PUC. They will review, and in the meantime, we're going to continue to work on refining the plans, getting feedback from partners, and really try to be ready to hit the ground running. Fingers crossed that the PUC approves the plan. We would hope to be ready to start launching by summer and early fall. Our assumption is that we will hear from the PUC on approval or not at some point in May, potentially early June. Be great if it was sooner than that, but we want to be ready to hit the ground running, with programs launching very quickly thereafter.
Okay.
And I think that's my last slide.
Yeah, and I'll stop sharing just so we can all see each other's faces, and we're happy to answer any questions anyone would have.
And I'll note too, we also shared just a 2-page overview with more details than I went through in this slide deck, including kind of the budgets and where we expect to be, investing resources sort of relative to each of the pieces of this campaign. So, I'm happy to speak to any of that if folks wanted to think about that as well as the slides.
So Efficiency Vermont will also be kicking in money when you buy a electric vehicle, incentive money? No,
we will not be providing a direct to customer incentive because there's a lot of layers of those incentives, but what we want to make sure is that customers have the information to understand what they'll be able to access. And we may be encouraging dealerships to work with them, provide them with information, support them in purchasing an electric vehicle. Right now, I think except for car dealers that are really engaged and invested in this, it can feel like an extra task and like it takes extra time for a car salesman in particular to have that conversation with customers. So we're going to be leveraging our incentives on the, at the dealership level potentially to improve that purchase experience.
Because it's such a growing demand for electric vehicles over the next few years. I hope all the dealers have exactly the same things to follow when they meet a customer and say this is available, because it's very confusing. Some manufacturers are giving something, the state's giving something, somebody giving, and I don't know where it is today, whether it varies from dealer to dealer. Who knows what's available, but we know it's going to be an increasing sales item in years to come. So I don't know what they're following today. It must be because every day it's changing, seems so different incentives.
My question is on the manufacturer's side. What, obviously, if they're, and GM has come out, I guess Ford has come out, that they intend to really discontinue old models or gas powered and move toward electric. So I would imagine if the manufacturers have made that business choice, that they've got a big investment in influencing and assisting their dealerships with this, because if they're producing a product, they want to sell it. And so I'm wondering if you have any idea in terms of what kinds of encouragement, what kind of instruction, what kind of information would be going out to dealers from the manufacturers, because they have a big investment. Dealers want to sell and manufacturers want to produce a product and they want it sold. So I'm just wondering to what extent dealers are already getting a lot of the information and encouragement or incentives from the manufacturers themselves. Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I would say, as we think about the approach that we've typically taken with other kind of new technologies, we work at state level. We also do try to work with other organizations nationally to work directly with manufacturers. And what we are hearing and what we are seeing at this point is that we're still very early stage. So a lot of these commitments that manufacturers have made they're still several years out, right? So they're going to be ramping up. And what can happen in those early stages is that markets like California, larger states will be where you see manufacturers tending to push these vehicles out. And it can be very easy for a state like Vermont to kind of end up on the other side of that curve, because it's just a little harder to get stuff here. So I think you're absolutely correct. The trend line over time is you're going to see a lot more of this coming to Vermont. I'm not sure we're quite there yet. That's not what we're hearing from some customers who might walk into a car dealership and say, I want to purchase an electric vehicle, and we don't have any in stock, right? It's hard to get those to Vermont. So I expect that one thing we're going to be looking at is how can we try to move Vermont up in the line a little bit by leveraging some national partnerships. But really, we have to look at the entire supply chain. And I do think over the last few months, certainly what we've heard in terms of the federal government and the focus from manufacturers and the federal government related to electric vehicle technology is different than what we were hearing 1 or 2 years ago. So we definitely want to keep on top of those trends and continuing to make sure that we're setting Vermont up to be in front of those, as opposed to, kind of more of an afterthought when we're thinking about national manufacturers and where they might be wanting to make pushes around cars just because of the size of our market.
Well, how do you compensate? We aren't going to change the size of our market. So how do you get yourself to the top of the line when it comes to manufacturers that are going to be their economics are going to really focus to the Californias and the large markets?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It seems like that's quite a hurdle to say, well, we're a small market, but how will you make Vermont unique to get us to the top of the line? Or are we going to get into regional partnerships? I have no idea, but obviously you want to, if I'm a manufacturer, I'm going to want to put my emphasis on where I'm going to get the greatest financial return. And it might not be the small market.
That's absolutely right. And so you honed in on it. Regional partnerships is often the way we engage. So Efficiency Vermont, when we look at technologies, Vermont is a small market typically for any technology, right? So often what Efficiency Vermont will do is leverage regional partnerships, leverage collaborations with other programs in other states, and talk about how we can structure our programs in such a way that it gets past the size of the market and creates an incentive. I think we're self-aware about the difficulty of that work, and so we'll be working on that at the same time as we're working at other parts of the supply chain as well. And I think we're going to learn a lot as we get engaged here. We haven't really had the ability to look at electric vehicle technology in the same way as others because it was transportation technology and not, some of the other technologies that we focused on in the past. So I don't want to overpromise, but I just want to give a general sense of how we typically approach a supply chain and the areas where I expect we'll be focusing and the type of goals that we'll be trying to set for how we can have an impact and support the state.
Well, I'm just wondering if the size of the dealership also makes a difference in terms of being attractive to the manufacturer.
But to sort of approach the question from another way, I mean, I think the size of the Vermont market speaks to the importance of why creating this network is so important, and why we really focus here for the use of these funds in terms of, yes, you're absolutely right that for Ford or GM, it might not be sort of top of mind. Let's make sure that Vermont is up to speed on the latest technological changes or incentives. But having that network and having the experts that we have to be able to track this and then be able to disseminate that, I think really does speak to the value of it.
Yeah.
Yes, Senator Persley.
And, Vermont, it does sign on to the California Resources Board Net Zero program or whatever it's called. And does allow us to get more electric vehicles than most other states, except for the other, whatever, 8 states that have also signed on to that. So, because if an electric vehicle sold here counts towards the manufacturer's requirement in California.
Correct,
So
yep.
that's an advantage that we have, but we want to keep that going, and we want to keep, at the forefront so that we keep getting electric cars. Because if they send them here and then they don't sell, then they'll stop sending them here. So we want to make sure that we're moving it through. And I assume part of the work is also with the used car dealers. Like when you say
Yes.
dealers, that's not always just the manufacturer franchise dealership. It could just be a used dealership, right? So and those not have the same access to the information that the manufacturers are sending.
Oh, sorry.
And I do have a question as well. You can comment on that. But the question is, at one point I saw Riley Allen's name on the agenda. Has the department weighed in on your plan to the PUC? Have they supported it or not supported it?
So on the first piece around used car dealerships, I did want to say that is a really great point, and that's one area that we really want to dig into and understand what's going on there for Vermont, because I don't think there's been a lot of ability or capacity for folks to actually get out and talk to used car dealerships and understand. I keep hearing just the statement like used EVs, they're shipped out of state. We want to understand like what is going on there, why would that be happening, and how can we try to avoid that so that there is more of a market for used EVs in the state. So I appreciate you calling that out. We will absolutely be focusing there. On the second piece of your question, yes, the Department of Public Service was pretty deeply engaged in our stakeholder process. We shared at least 3 iterations of our draft working paper and our filing with the PUC. And I don't want to get in front of their process for review as well, but everything we have heard from them has been positive and appreciative and feeling like this is going in a solid direction.
Okay, all right. Questions, comments? Yes, Senator Ingalls.
Back to Senator Kitchell's point about trying to get more buy-in from the manufacturers or to put us ahead in a small market. And you talk about leveraging partnerships. What's that mean? What's that mean? That how can you leverage partnerships to get us more buy-in, to get us to ahead of anybody? Can you explain some of that for us?
Yeah, I think what will probably be easiest is if I use an analogy for a technology where we've already done this, and then we could think about how some of those tactics could be applied for electric vehicles, because obviously Senator Kitchell's point that this market is still evolving very rapidly is a really good one, and I don't want to imply a level of knowledge I haven't gained yet about exactly how all the pieces are going to fit together for electric vehicles. But if you take cold climate heat pumps as an example, one thing that we did is we actually banded together with several other efficiency programs in other states, and we set specs in the market that said, here's the type of heat pump that we know from testing, we know from having it out in the field with consumers is actually going to be appropriate for Vermont's climate, because heat pumps existed for quite a long time in other parts of the country. They were frequently used in the South. They weren't frequently used in cold climates. So we said we want to understand which of these heat pumps are going to work best in Vermont's climate, which ones are going to meet a minimum performance standard, and we're going to sort of set that spec. And then we're going to go out and we're going to commit as efficiency programs to putting a strong level of incentive in place, to doing a level of marketing in our state, and among all of our programs banded together, which creates a larger market. We're going to show the manufacturers that it is worth it to them to send their technologies to places where they otherwise wouldn't, because they know that they're not going to have to do all the work to get these things placed in homes. If they meet the standards that we've set, we're going to go out and help make sure that customers are informed about it, are willing to make that purchase, and are going to support that technology coming to the state. It might look a little different with electric vehicles, right? I don't know that we're going to be setting specs for electric vehicles in the same way we would for a heat pump, but the fact that we can leverage relationships, partnerships. Senator Perchik already mentioned partnerships that Vermont has already started to engage in to help encourage sending electric vehicles to the state. What we want to do is dig in and understand, are there additional things that we can do to support that side of the supply chain? I will say, you know, a good deal of our plan is much more focused on the supply chain once those technologies come to Vermont. But what we're recognizing is there's so much activity happening nationally. We'd be remiss if we didn't think about that side of the supply chain too. So I expect that we will be looking at those opportunities and thinking about other partnerships we can help engage in, you know, or monitor on behalf of the state to help support, you know, looking at the entire range of the supply chain.
Thank you.
Any other questions? That was a good overview. A lot of moving parts right now. And all this whole market is, like I said, we spent a considerable amount of time on it, and it's so it's quite interesting because it's brand new for a lot of folks to understand this whole thing. It's a lot of moving pieces. Well, Efficiency Vermont does a good job on their other issues, so this will be good for you. Yeah, something new challenge.
Thank you. And just to say that this is a 3-year program, and so we're happy to come back a year from now and reflect on lessons learned from year 1 and looking forward to year 2, and hopefully we can all do it in person.
Okay.
Senator
Yes, Senator Perchlik.
Yeah, I emailed Dave Roberts, the expert on incentives, to Senator Kitchell's question. He did say that both the utility and the state incentives can be captured if you lease a vehicle.
That's what I thought. And I think that's so important because people.
A lot of leases today.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator, for saving me the time. I was going to get off this and email Dave right away. So I appreciate you closing the loop in real time.
And didn't we also hear that dealers, rather than they're keeping those cars for resale more? I think, didn't we hear that from maybe the Capstone folk?
That's what
that
Paul
as
said.
these lease vehicles are being turned in, they are not, they're keeping
Not
them
sending
for
them
resale.
back. Yeah, they're retaining them. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be good to hear from when Efficiency Vermont finishes this program, like how, because I've heard actually both. Zabriskie said that the other day, but maybe it was last year. Other people said that they weren't. So maybe it'd be good to get the real data on that. How many are?
Jane, you can lease a new car, Jane. There you go. You're all set.
Look,
You can
I'm
part
traveling
with your,
so
you can part
little.
with your 1949 Chevy.
No, my 1924 Model T.
Well, that's right. That's right. It's no joke. She still uses it to back and forth to work.
You convert it to electric.
Yeah, she got converted electric. Right?
Yeah, that's she only uses it when she can't get the horse out of the barn.
It's still a crankable one, right? Still crank it.
I have to tell you, with COVID, that our travel is so limited. It consists of pretty much driving from Danville to St. Johnsbury a couple of times a week. It's quite amazing.
We kid Jane a lot about it because she doesn't like cars at all. She drives anything, doesn't make a difference how old it is or what, as long as it goes from point A to point B. It isn't that she doesn't can't afford to buy one, but she just doesn't excite her at all.
No, I never. No, I guess I could say
we
that.
joke with her a lot. Have a little fun. Okay.
I'm learning a lot too as we get engaged here. So I hear you, Senator Kitchell. And I did just want to call out to that last point. A Capstone was, I would be remiss if I didn't note that they have been a stakeholder in our process too. And we expect to work very closely with them, particularly as we're thinking about connecting with low and moderate income customers. So thank you for the opportunity to do that specific call out because they're a great partner.
Good.
And thank you to the whole committee for your time today. And we're always happy to come back and please follow up with any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Good, thank you. Okay, committee. Our next witnesses are at 10:45. I believe that's what Liz told us. Is that correct, Liz?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to take a break till 10:45. Okay.
Oh, that's great.
Yes,
Oh.
Senator Chittenden.